Part two for this evening. All right, we are on the power of awareness, chapter 7. This chapter is about attitude. Okie. So, when you look at something, what you see depends on the assumption you make when you look at it, not on what is there. The adjectives, the descriptives that you attach to an item defines what you see. This determines your movements consciously and subconsciously towards fulfilling your goals. So imagine that you look at a lamp. It might be a lamp that you grew up seeing your whole life, well, your young life. It was given to the family by an aunt that you really liked. So it's not just a lamp, it's Auntie's lamp that she gave to the family. And so it would tend to invoke, sentimental feelings about this auntie. It'll tend to give you thoughts about different times in your growing up when the lamp was, present. If you guys knocked it down, you and your siblings knocked it down one day or came too close to it. If it was sitting next to a chair that also sat your favorite uncle on one of those holiday visits, so it's not just a lamp, it's the impression that we have of it, the background story attached to it that motivates us in one way or another with our feelings, with our thoughts, with our focus. As I said, you think about the aunt, you think about the uncle, you think about possibly knocking it down with you and your siblings. Those are the distractions when you bring something to mind. Now, Mr. Goddard talks about an experiment conducted by Princeton and Dartmouth psychology folks who proved that what you see when you look at something depends not so much on what is there as on the assumption. So this was actually from an experiment that was conducted. Since what we believe, he says, to be the real physical world is actually only an assumptive world, it is not surprising that these experiments prove that what appears to be solid reality is actually the results of expectations or assumptions. So, what we feel, what we think, what we imagine, what we attach to different things defines the reality of it. The goodness of it, the not so goodness of it, the whatever comes to mind, whatever is invoked by our emotions. And he said, over a century ago, this truth was stated by Emerson. Okay? As the world was plastic and fluid in the hands of God, so it is ever to so much of his attributes as we bring to it. The ignorance and sin, it is flint. They adapt themselves to it as they may, but in proportion as a man has anything in him that is divine, the firmament flows before him and makes his signet and form. Your assumption is the hand of God molding the firmament into the image of that which you assume. So, much like the great I am, bringing things into reality, the be saying be, and there it is. We have a similar way of bringing our goals, bringing our desires into fruition. The assumption of the wish fulfilled is the high tide which lifts you easily off the bar. I'm going to skip past a little bit of that. It's wordy and not necessary. It's just kind of a rehashing, a different way of saying the same thing. So going on a little further, he says, it lifts the mind into prophecy in the full right sense of the word. And if you have that controlled imagination and absorbed attention, which it is possible to attain, you may be sure that all your assumption implies will come to pass. All that your assumption implies will come to pass. For example, bear with me, and I thank you for hanging in so graciously. For example, this is the story of a costume designer. Okay, he says, one day, a costume designer described to me her difficulties in working with a prominent theatrical producer. She was convinced that he unjustly criticized her and rejected her best work, and that often he was deliberately rude and unfair to her. Upon hearing her story, I explained that if she found the other rude and unfair, it was a sure sign that she herself was wanting, and that it was not the producer, but herself that was in need of a new attitude. This gets good. Let me keep going. Especially if you're not familiar with this type of thing. I told her that the power of the law of assumption and its practical application could be discovered only through experience, and that only by assuming that the situation was already what she wanted it to be could she prove that she could bring about the change. Her employer was merely bearing witness, telling her by his behavior what her concept of him was. I excuse me. I suggested that it was quite probable that she was carrying on conversations with him in her mind, which were filled with criticism and recriminations. There was no doubt but that she was mentally arguing with the producer, for others only echo which we whisper to them in secret. So this is the idea of magnetizing the the experiences that you have. Have you ever been in a situation where, say, you were getting ready to walk into a party and you may not have felt that you would enjoy yourself? You knew some of the people that were going to be there, and based on previous experiences, you really didn't want to be there. You're rehashing in your mind on your way to this party that you're going to have this type of experience or previous experiences that you had with different people who were going to be there. So when you walk in the door, your energy is already in that vein, and people are looking at you. They may or may not be sensitive to the idea of vibrations, your energy, your emotions preceding you into the door. And so when they get around you, when you arrive, you start having experiences that play out what was already running through your head to cause you to not enjoy yourself. That's essentially what's going on. That you sent your energy ahead of yourself. She sent her energy ahead of herself and created the experience. So I'm going to keep going. There was no doubt but that she was mentally arguing with the producer, for others only echo that which we whisper to them in secret. I asked her if it was not true that she talked to him mentally, and if so, what those conversations were like. She confessed that every morning on her way to the theater, she told him just what she thought of him in a way she would never have dared address him in person. The intensity and force of her mental arguments with him automatically established his behavior toward her. She began to realize that all of us carry on mental conversations, but unfortunately, on most occasions, these conversations are argumentative, that we have only to observe the passerby on the street to prove this assertion, that so many people are mentally engrossed in conversation and few appear to be happy about it, but the very intensity of their feeling must lead them quickly to the unpleasant incident they themselves have mentally created and therefore must now encounter, magnetizing it to themselves. You get what you expect. You get the energy that you put out. When she realized what she had been doing, she agreed to change her attitude and to live this law faithfully by assuming that her job was highly satisfactory and her relationship with the producer was a very happy one. To do this, she agreed that before going to sleep at night, on her way to work, and at other intervals during the day, she would imagine that he had congratulated her on her fine designs, and that she, in turn, had thanked him for his praise and kindness. To her great delight, she soon discovered for herself that her own attitude was the cause of all that befell her. So think about different experiences that you've had, you know, happy ones, not so happy ones, and the thoughts that you had prior to each of these situations. We magnetize what we want to ourselves. We practice the thoughts, the words, the deeds to influence what we want into being. So, becoming the master of our attention, becoming the master of our imaginations, it is necessary for us to practice putting out the energy, thinking the thoughts to magnetize the experiences to us that we want to have. Okay. Now, um, some things are outside of our control, and a lot of that depends on the mindsets of some other people. I mean, you've been around, you've met a bunch of different type of people. You know, some people are decidedly happy folks. The sun shines out of their behind. Okay. They make it nice for other people to be around them. They're usually the one that's glowing, that's happy, that's speaking the positive words into the area around them. You have people who seem to live in Crankyville. It's hard for them to find anything good, anything happy to focus and praise, to be thankful for, you know. Um, so they are magnetizing their experience. And if we encounter them, then there's only so much influence that we're going to have over it with those people who are on a particular bend. They're cut a particular way. But in other things, the things that are more malleable will end up having the experiences that we envision for ourselves. And so I'm going to wrap up this chapter. Um, if you haven't already, feel free to join me in this reading. His writing is very different, as you've come to hear. As I go, paragraph by paragraph sometimes. But I do my best to reword it flesh it out in a way that's a modern understanding. And I thank you for hanging in here. So, with this, I'm going to say join me again next week. I already have my notes for the next two chapters ready, and I'm excited to dive even further. So, that is the plan. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share, subscribe, um, follow, and I will talk to you soon. Be well.